There were dramatic scenes in Prime Minister's questions, clearly caught everybody, including the Prime Minister, by surprise. And we don't know at all about the personal issues Keir Starmer referred to and that were happening for Rachel Reeves. But it came after a torrid week for the government and for the Treasury, overruled on these welfare benefits. I don't think I've ever seen scenes at Prime Minister's questions quite like that.
No, I've not. Now, listen, I've been friends with Rachel since we were both 18. I mean, I've known her for a long time from our student days, and I know her, I know her sister, I know her family really well. I'm absolutely confident that, you know, that she is a tough political figure, and this is about something personally going on in her life. I don't know what it is, and even if I did, it wouldn't be appropriate to talk about it anyway, but I don't. But it does seem that there is something personally going on. And actually, it is a reminder that all of us politicians were human beings with families and loved ones and pressures in our private lives and our home lives and all the rest of it that every human being contends with every day of the week. But yes, it is. We've not seen this before in politics, but maybe it's a good thing that politicians are more human.
But the problem, as you know, and we were showing some of the pictures earlier, images can very unfairly sometimes become a metaphor for political events. I was talking earlier about the famous picture of John Major with his head in his hands.
Yeah.
He was, in fact, trying to think of a rhyming joke to tell at a speech, but that became, on the front page of the papers, a metaphor for the major government in crisis. And the problem is, independent of, you know, the truth and, you know, obviously, kind of personal anguish and humanity is what we want in our, is a truth for our politicians. The fact is that the image, it's not a good image on the front of the papers.
Well, indeed, and we all know this is in a week which has been, frankly, a torrid week for the government. I mean, I actually think we can reform welfare. I think there are proposals and initiatives that the government should pursue to deal with some of the problems in the welfare system. But look, you know, even the most supportive Labour figures, and I'm a supporter of this government, can see the handling of that has been a fiasco. So it's been a difficult week. However, I am still confident that Rachel Reeves will remain the Chancellor of the Exchequer for many years to come. Keir Starmer's now said that. He should have said it at the dispatch box as well.
Why didn't he do that?
Well, when you're at the...
Why didn't he do that?
You know what it's like when you're in there.
You think he didn't see what exactly was going on, and so when Kevin Badenoch, leader of the opposition, was saying, say that, he talked about other things because he wasn't quite aware?
It was very odd. If he thought that he was going to back her, why didn't he say what he said yesterday? Why didn't he just say at the dispatch box, she will be there for a very long time, which is exactly what he said today?
I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? Pictures sometimes appear to tell 1,000 words, but so too a lack of words, so too a vacuum. And that's the problem now,
So look, I mean, I think there's obviously something going on in the background. I don't know her personal circumstances.
And we all wish her the best, don't we? Everybody, whatever the situation.
If it was very serious
going on,
and there was a bereavement or something of that nature, she should never have been in the House of Commons in the first place. She shouldn't have gone to the floor of the House. She should have said, you know...
Yeah, but then everyone would be saying, where's Rachel Reeves?
Well,
you know, what's going on?
She could have said... And then actually, if it was serious...
She might have been wanting to be brave and carry on.
But I think... I mean, I'm old-fashioned. I would never cry on the floor of the House. I think you can cry privately, but I think when you're in that arena, you've got to hold it together.
And you had reasons to cry at times.
Of course, I could. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, when I was sacked, it was the Prime Minister that was.
You know what it's like when the bond market spikes.
I know all of that stuff, and actually, you know, it's very difficult on a personal level. But I think, you know, you owe it to your colleagues to try and hold it together.
It looked to me like she was trying. It looked to me like she was exhausted.
She was.
She'd had a huge week, and we all know those moments when it just mounts up, and I really hope there isn't something that we find out later that's also going on. I hope it's a manageable personal situation that's going on in her life. But it looked like that, and it was it's been a strange feeling observing this week from the outside, as though the build-up and the sort of collapse and a sense of unravelling was completely manifested in those years. For the government as well as for her.
Can I just say...
And she had also just had, I think, a difficult exchange with the Speaker.
That's right.
Yeah. She had clashed with him on Monday. He had said her answers were too long. She had been a bit dismissive of him in the House of Commons. And as I understand it, She had this exchange with the Speaker on the way into the chamber and then left and then came back again. So I think whatever was going on in her personal life and her political life was then sort of accelerated by that confrontation.
I mean, the thing that I
Speaker.
find very odd, I mean, I said it last week on this programme, was that they gave the concessions way too early. And I said, if they give the concessions early, people will just ask for more. And that's exactly what happened. And I think she's in a very difficult position now because she's got to find an extra £4.5–5 billion at the budget. She's very isolated politically. There aren't that many backbenchers that are coming out on her side in support of her. She's being briefed against by some of those backbenchers and I think people within the government. And she's totally dependent, as most chancellors are, on the goodwill of the Prime Minister. Yep. And I think all of that pressure is making life very difficult for her.
Do you think, and you've been a Chancellor under pressure, as we never fail to remind you on this show, do we? Do we, Kwasi? But you've been a Chancellor under pressure.
It's all part of therapy, isn't it?
It's all part of, yeah, that's the way we see it.
You're brilliant. You're great for me.
We're smiling, which is good now.
About you.
Maybe it's working. So, you know, you've been a Prime Minister project. You've been a Prime Minister who's later said that they got things wrong. Do you think part of those tears is that she felt, in a way, that she has got things wrong?
I think she's been buffeted around, as one often is in high office, and I think she's not really in control anymore.
So not in control of the money, or not in control of herself, or not in control of the relationship?
The whole situation is one in which she's very isolated.
We know exactly a week ago, Thursday morning last week, the Treasury was being very public. There was going to be no U-turn at all.
Yeah. That's right.
And then we've had U-turn after U-turn. Jonathan, putting aside the tears and the broader politics, you said it was a fiasco.
Yes.
Is the fiasco the handling of the U-turn in the last week? Is it not understanding the strength of backbench concerns in the last couple of months? Is it the decision at the last minute to include those big cuts in personal independence payments just before the spring statement? Is the fiasco boxing themselves so hard on not raising taxes, but then needing the money, that they had to turn to big welfare cuts? Where do you, because you've been in Downing Street, you know how it is to run a political operation, where is the fundamental problem here?
I think there are a number of issues here. First of all, the welfare system does need to be reformed.
Sure.
We've seen a hugely sharp increase in numbers flowing onto these benefits, particularly young people who are not in education or training. No, that's not the fiasco. But if you go back to first principles, it is right that this system needs change. It disincentivises people going into employment, and huge numbers of people, for reasons of stress, anxiety, depression, ADHD, are getting sets of benefits which were actually designed to help people deal with the extra costs associated with their disability. So that system does need to be looked at.
Yeah, but you said that it's been a fiasco, and I don't think there's many people that would disagree. So who put the F in the fiasco? Who is the person that's got this wrong? Do you know what I mean? Because we can't blame the previous 14 years for this week and a half.
But obviously, these reforms were not properly communicated. And when MPs were raising legitimate concerns, and your job as a Member of Parliament is to say, hang on a minute, my constituents are raising complaints about this, I think this system needs to be tweaked. And for a long time, the MPs were not involved.
It wasn't just MPs. Didn't Liz Kendall, the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, say at the beginning, back in the spring, if you make this an exercise in short-term revenue raising, as opposed to a much more careful, long...
People say that, but who knows what people have said behind the scenes?
You will know better than me. So I mean,
this is one of the problems.
Well,
this is one of the problems that Rachel had. I mean, clearly, there are people in the cabinet. I don't know whether it's Liz Kendall, I don't know whether it's Angela Rayner, but clearly there are people within the government that are arguing against what Rachel was trying to do, that have been probably, perhaps, briefing against her, and that's one of the causes of the tension and the pressure that she's facing. That's absolutely going to be...
But if you're going to reform the welfare system, it should be driven by trying to get people into jobs and not just driven by we've got to find £5 billion worth of cuts.
Exactly.
Of course. But of course,
the big
this
F
is
in the
not...
crackers?
Well, I'm going to dodge and swerve
You are
your
dodging and
attempts.
swerving.
Yeah, you're talking absolutely.
Jonathan, you don't have to anymore.
You're not an
You can
MP
tell us what
anymore.
you
You
really
can say what you think.
Join
You
the
can say what
quality
you think.
therapy centre.
No. So the problem is the fallout doesn't stop there, is it?
Yeah.
We are, because it was such an extraordinary scene and we feel emotional connection to somebody crying in that way. But of course now, what do? Does this mean, because the papers are saying it, there's no option to hike taxes? Is that what the tears are about from Rachel Reeves? Is that what we're now facing? Because people at home will be thinking, my goodness, we've had all this pain. Those of them that relied on PIP will be slightly relieved, possibly, but also wondering where next. And what does it mean wider as well? Jeremy Corbyn said yesterday, might just form a formal political party. Is he going to start mopping up the disaffected and doing a reform from the other end of the scale?
There's a couple of things there. I don't think the Labour government will break its manifesto promises on, I think it was income tax, VAT, and national insurance for workers. I cannot believe it'll break its promises on them. And I think Pat McFadden yesterday was saying, maybe even he said it on here, I don't know. But they won't break those promises. But yeah, I mean, there are Labour MPs.
Well, where's the money going to come from?
Well, indeed,
then?
and there are Labour MPs saying, you know, look at this particular tax rise on this particular, you know, whether it's gambling or on wealth. And there are also Labour MPs saying we cannot, or the Labour government cannot lose any reputation for fairness. So look at how you lift children out of poverty as well.
The fundamental problem was that the whole point of this welfare bill wasn't about welfare reform. It was about saving £5 billion or £4.5 billion.
OK.
Now, that's completely been unravelled, so she's got to find the money elsewhere. And you're quite right. She can't then put up, tax on workers, national insurance, those things. So she's going to find the money somewhere else.
And it's easy to find in the Treasury 100 million. It's not that hard to find £500 million or even £1 billion. But finding 5 every year is hard.
Yeah,
that's right.
And scrabbling around trying to find sources of revenue is going to be, I mean, it's going to be a challenging few months.
That's right, and that's what they're going to be doing all summer. And I hope that they're going to road test, because they've got time to do that, road test some of the ideas with the MPs, because I mean that often works much better than if you try and do things very quickly.
Well, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, is on the programme later. I'm sure we'll talk to him about all of this. But what he's really coming on to talk about is this huge, long-awaited 10-year plan for the NHS. The Prime Minister's going to outline the government's plans to overhaul the NHS later today, saying the service has to reform or die, more reforms, and provide patients with easier, quicker and more convenient care. Already, though, some have criticised the plans, asking how they'll be paid for and how they'll be staffed. Well, should we get a GP's perspective on this? We've got our Dr. Amir, joining us now from his surgery in West Yorkshire. Good to see you this morning, Dr. Amir. I mean, we have talked, haven't we, on this show? You have spoken about the long wait for this 10-year plan. From what you know so far, what do you make of it? Are there things you're welcoming?
Morning. Yeah, there are actually. There's some positive things and there's some questions as well. The positive things are moving care into the community. That's what this NHS plan focuses on, getting care closer to patients and having them not having to travel far for care, that time-consuming bus travel, which is expensive for patients to get to hospitals. The other big thing is having people under one roof. So nurses, physios, perhaps even things like employment advisors, all under one roof, which again will be welcome, because one-stop shops for patients where they can come and see people for their diabetes, their asthma, perhaps get some job advice as well and some physio for their back pain. It sounds ideal. And there's a move towards better artificial intelligence, particularly in GP surgeries like mine. I spend a lot of time writing up notes after I see my patients. And if we can cut that back through AI technology that does all of that for me, I can spend more time with patients. And one of the big things that it focuses on is better dental care as well, which I think will be welcomed by lots of our viewers, because we know poor dental hygiene is linked to higher rates of things like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, as well as lung infections. It doesn't just stay in your mouth, those kind of issues. So all of that is welcome. I do have some questions and concerns as well. The elephant in the room is the infrastructure. Where are these centres, neighbourhood centres, going to be built? How are they going to be paid for? How long will it take? And will each centre offer the same service, or will there be a postcode lottery? Social care is the other big question. There isn't much about social care in this NHS 10-year plan, and we know from bitter experience that if you don't invest in social care alongside the NHS, it has a long-term impact on NHS wait times and getting people out of hospital. And the other big thing is staffing. Yes, we'll need more people like district nurses and health visitors, but there's talks here about recruiting and training more GPs, and that's a real issue for me, Kate. You know I train GPs. I've been doing that for over a decade. But actually, right now, we do have a lot of GP trainees coming out of GP training who don't have jobs, which will surprise a lot of people because we've always talked about them not being enough GPs. But actually, the problem we have now is not enough GP jobs. And the reason for that is the workforce planning hasn't been great. We've expanded training places, but there aren't the jobs for GPs to come out for.
There aren't the jobs. I think people might be quite confused because they'll be thinking, well, hang on, we know there's a need because we can't get an appointment and we want all of that experience. So are you really saying there isn't the funding for the roles already allocated, which means, again, how do we pay for all this?
Yes, so there isn't the funding. So the funding hasn't kept up with GP training. So we don't have the money to pay for GPs to take these jobs or not offer jobs with the funding there. But the other thing is, between 2019 and 2024, there was funding in primary care for roles other than GPs. So things like physicians associates, physios, pharmacists were encouraged to come into general practice, but that money wasn't made available to recruit newly qualified GPs. That has changed slightly more recently with West Streeting expanding it out. However, that isn't the same as actually getting a long-term GP in your GP surgery. What that means is a GP working across several sites across an area. So there's been a mismatch of funding, poor workforce planning, and red tape around who we can recruit in primary care. So when we're talking in this NHS plan about recruiting more GPs, we've actually got a lot of GPs that haven't got jobs, and that really needs addressing right now.
Dr. Amir, stay with us for a moment. We're just going to get kind of a reaction from Jonathan and Kwasi, and we'll see what you make of it. Interesting there, when Dr. Amir talks about this new vision in the community, shifting the focus from hospitals. He talked about all of those services local in the community under one roof. Yeah. But the problem is, where are these roofs? Where are these buildings? Where is this infrastructure? And the latest settlement for the NHS has funding for the next 3 years rising less than the national average. So is this a 10-year vision which the government has actually got the funding to start to actually implement in the next 3 years before the election? Well,
I mean, first of all, remember that one of the big winners from Rachel Reeves' spending review was West Streeting. There is more money going into the NHS. But slower than the historic average in the NHS. I mean, it's not big money. I mean, the historic uplifts were always 4%. It was actually much more under the last Labour government. It's still a bigger settlement than it's been getting in recent years. But you're right. The budget that we call the capital budget for the NHS is more or less flat. That's right. And that's where, so it's a legitimate question, where are these community health centres going to be built and how they're going to be built? However, I do believe it is the right approach to bring a whole set of health services together. So you can go see your pharmacy there, you can go and see physio there. Hopefully there is better mental health provision there as well, because we know that's one of the big problems in society, and by the way, one of the drivers of the welfare problems. So I think, as a principle, it's absolutely the right thing to do. I'm all behind it. I think it's a really exciting announcement. I really care about health policy, as you know. But yeah, very, very legitimate questions about where the long-term funding is.
There are a couple of issues. So there's obviously the funding question, and we won't know much about that until certainly the budget. And that can always change given, the global economic environment and where we are. So that's a big, big factor in this. And then the second issue, which I'm slightly wary of, is that I remember the Andrew Lansley reforms. You remember 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And nobody understood what he was trying to do. I mean, even David Cameron was unsure about that. So we've been here before. We've said, we've had governments who've said, look, we're going to radically transform things. But they've got to, A, carry people with them so that they explain well what's going on. And critically, they've got to find the money to deliver on it. And those questions are open questions.
Just on that, funnily enough, the last Labour government was moving to this type of model, and it was actually Andrew Lansley who put a stop to it in 2010. It was, I mean, the last Labour government used this awful phrase, polyclinics. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
And Andrew Lansley came in and he stopped it all. So,
but nobody knew what they were doing.
Yeah,
nobody knew what...
This could have happened sort of 15 years ago, actually, if it wasn't for Andrew Lansley, funnily enough.
Well, no, I think... I mean, there were reasons why, because we essentially ran out of money in 2010. I mean, there's a political debate about that. But I think, you've got to explain what you're trying to do in terms of the structure, because people just listen to this and think, how is this actually going to affect me? Yeah. I mean, I'm sick of all these things about structures and community centres and all of that.
Dr. Amir, are you still with us or not?
I'm hoping he is still with us. I'm sure you've got things to say about that. I also wanted to ask you about the Princess of Wales comments about putting on a brave face, because I think you will have views about the longer-term requirements of recovering from cancer. And also, you're rather brave-faced this morning, this new moustache.
I know.
You've used your time well in the growing of that. That sprung up quickly.
GMB viewers across the country are thinking, what is going on?
What's going on? Yeah, sorry, viewers. I was trying to go for like a Tom Selleck look, but I think I'm more Freddie Mercury. I'm not quite sure.
Both are good. Yeah. Both are good.
Both are good. Both are good. But in terms of Kate and the cancer, I think her talking about some of the holistic approach to cancer care, because as you know, when you had cancer, if you finish treatment, that isn't the end of your cancer journey. There's so much recovery to do. There's so much to get over. It's a really traumatic experience. And she's talking about things like acupuncture and reflexology, which is helping her move on. But actually, she's talked about nature therapy as well, which is something I'm passionate about, time in nature to settle the mind, that mindfulness there. All of that is a big holistic approach to cancer care. And that might be something that these neighbourhood centres can learn from, because that kind of holistic, broader approach to care is always beneficial to patients.
Dr. Amir, a.k.a. Magnum PI, great to get your insight on all sorts of things this morning. And to you
Get your
too.
sombrero on and get to work, Dr. Amir.